Okay. Well, we'll welcome those who have joined us and we will get started. We'll wait another minute or two and then get started, but we're really glad to have you guys with us tonight. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and just share a little bit about what you're seeing in front of you, which I know many of you obviously are aware of since you have registered for one of our Call-in Cares seminars. But we just want to make sure that you all are aware of all of the seminars that we're offering. Hopefully you've checked them out and you have registered for multiple ones. I believe they all still have space. We run through the end of February. Some very specific, well, Jim, our speaker tonight, is actually going to be teaching another one for us on sales. And we've got all kinds of retail and restaurant and just some wonderful, very experienced, specialized speakers sharing with us right now. So please visit the website. And also the CARES application. Some of you may have already completed that, but please take a moment and do that. What we are doing through this process is taking applications to see how we can further help you along in your business by providing this specialized counseling for you to hire the experts like Mr. Tallarico here and others that can then help you further. And we really want to help as many of you as we can. So feel free to fill out that application. It's very simple. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'd love to see how else we can help you. We'll talk about it a little again at the end. I've got a couple other things I can share with you, but being mindful of time, I'll go ahead and welcome you officially to tonight's seminar, 7 Essential Skills for Leading in Turbulent Times. My name is Betsy Coulter. I am with the Call-in SBDC, and we are so excited to have Jim Tallarico with us tonight. This will be an interactive session. It will be recorded. We please encourage you to ask questions. Just use the chat at the bottom. Just click on the chat and put your questions in, and I'll be keeping track of those. And Jim's welcome to or open to us interrupting him and stopping him if all of a sudden something doesn't make sense or you really would love for him to delve a little deeper into that, please speak up. Let's see, we've talked a little bit about the application. So I tell you what, well, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. Jim Tallarico is a nationally recognized small to mid-sized business expert located here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And he is CEO and founder of the Greater Prairie Business Consulting, Inc. Jim has more than 30 years of diversified business experience and has helped thousands of business owners across the United States and in Canada. His client stories have been highlighted in the Wall Street Journal, Dallas Business Journal, Chicago Daily Herald, and on MSNBC's Your Business. Jim is a certified management consultant, and as a CMC, he represents evidence of the highest standards of consulting. We are very thrilled to have him with us tonight. And Jim, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you. Betsy, thank you very much. You know, I'm having a problem moving the slide.
Okay.
Is there something that we need to do here?
Let's see here. I'm not sure. Everything was working perfectly before we switched it over. So hang on.
Okay.
Everything is shared.
By chance, can you move the?
I can. Let me. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that.
That's okay.
Well, darn, we had all this all set up. Okay, well.
Let me try it again.
Share your screen with us again. There we go. There we go.
No.
So we should be able to just resume our slideshow.
Okay, great. I can do it that way. So welcome everybody to 7 Essential Skills for Leading in Turbulent Times. Betsy, thank you for hosting the event. I've attended some of the seminars over the last couple of weeks. I think it's really a fantastic program. So I'm very happy to be part of it.
Click over on the from beginning, Jim.
Okay, let me try that.
Now will it let you?
Okay,
There
yeah,
we go.
I think so.
There we go.
Let me go back.
Okay.
All right, great. So that was a great introduction. Yeah, the three things I think that makes me different from others is the scope and breadth of my experience. I've worked with thousands of businesses. The fact that I'm a certified management consultant, only 1% of all consultants in the world are certified. So my background has been vetted. And I also adhere to a code of ethics. My company was a finalist for the Better Business Bureau Torch Award for Ethics this year, last year, and it's also a certified ethics-focused organization. So today's learning objectives, there are 7. We're going to start off talking about managing during turbulent times, setting goals. We're going to talk about feedback and follow-up, counseling to expectations, delegation, effective communications, and improving supervisory skills. There's a lot of content in here, and I like to use the analogy of a golf swing in order to manage well or lead well. It's just like a golf swing. You have to do a lot of things right to hit the ball straight. So I hope that after this webinar, if you have not saved the slides, please do that because they'll be a great future reference. So I found this statistic in the paper this past week, and I thought it was very interesting. 2 Harvard economists have conservatively estimated that the cost of COVID to the nation is going to be about $16 trillion. Our economy, I think, is at $21.7 trillion. So we could lose nearly a whole year of productivity because of this crisis. If you add natural disasters, that's another 22 billion. And the interruption to business has been significant. 80% of businesses say that they've been affected by the crisis. 10% say they're doing about the same, and only 10% say they're doing better. Supply chain disruptions were very significant in the beginning. I'm sure everybody remembers having to go out and try to find toilet paper and masks and gloves, alcohol, those kinds of things. Worker disruption. Many people are working from home right now. You have to worry about getting COVID. If you have kids, they're being homeschooled. If you're taking care of elderly people, you have to make sure you keep them safe. So there's a lot of challenges on workers. Financial disruption. I saw that the SBA on Monday just released the application for the PPP, the second round of PPP loans. Hopefully everyone has taken advantage of the first round. Consumer disruption. Think about restaurants. I know the ones that I go to up here in Denton are open. A lot of them are open just 50%. So, how do they get that extra business? Do they go out to first responders, try to serve them box lunches and so forth? And they also have to pivot for more takeout. Technology, Zoom is a phenomenon that really didn't exist before COVID, at least not in any significant way. Virtual selling, most companies now do virtual selling some way. So a lot of disruption. In terms of safety considerations, there are a bunch of things you have to do to make sure you keep your people safe, and there are legal ramifications. So there's a lot of stuff there. I want to start off by talking about change, and I want to get inside people's heads and talk about the 3 things that are a problem when trying to implement change. The first is that we're all creatures of habit. So if you ever try to be on a diet, usually after a week or 2, you're back to the same old habits, and that's because you're wired to do the same thing. We like the status quo, and many of us fear the unknown. So how do we get people to change? I'm going to go through these different ideas, and then we'll talk about a specific example. What you want to do first is you want to identify the need for change. Second, you want to educate people about the benefits of change. You want to invite employee input about the change. You want to create a plan to implement the change. You want to point out the benefits of change, ensure good communications throughout the process, implement change in stages, reward positive behavior, be firm, fair, and consistent when correcting unacceptable behavior, and manage the change closely for the first 30 days. So that last concept is very important. I learned that back in the 90s. I was watching TV late at night, and there was this guy named Tony Robbins, and he said, if you want to change behavior, you have to do the same thing 27 times. So in my consulting, often what I do is I work very closely with that company for the first month to make sure that that change sticks. And if it does, chances are that's going to be a very successful change. When I started consulting, I worked with a colleague, he was in the military, and he told the client, first thing, you have to run your business just like the military. You have to be firm, fair, and consistent. And what happens is some people are good at change, others that aren't. And when I talk to companies, a lot of companies have problems with change. Basically what happens is you have to get everyone to change. If you don't get everyone to change, the people who did change are going to say, hey, look, that guy isn't doing it, so why should I do it? So work very closely with those people during the change. If they're doing a good job, pat them on the back, give them the positive reinforcement. That's the best thing you can do. If people aren't changing, then stick with them and really try that first month to get them to change their behavior. And if you can get everybody to do it, that's really the trick. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're a company that installs air conditioning. So you have these technicians, and the crisis affected you. The only people who are getting air conditioning units are those who absolutely need it. So what I usually see in organizations like that is the guys will come in the morning, they'll get a cup of coffee, they'll talk to their supervisor, the supervisor will give them the schedule, they'll identify what they need in terms of parts and supplies and that, they'll load their truck, then they'll get out on the road, and that can take up to an hour. And so, during these lean times, if I was the manager of that company, what I would do is say, hey, we need to be more efficient. So, I would educate the people about the benefits of change. Oftentimes you guys at the last minute, you forget a part, you have to go back and do it again. You're late for dinner, you can't tuck your kids in at night. So we're going to be more efficient, and it's going to benefit everybody. Then I would invite input from the employees. So one employee might say, hey, Jim, you know what? One of the problems is our warehouse is so unorganized, it takes me a half hour to find the parts we need. Okay, so that needs to be part of the implementation plan. So I would have a meeting, we would point out the benefits of the change, and what I always like to do is offer an incentive. So if the company wins and the owner wins, we also want the employees to win. So now we got a great plan. We communicate the plan, we implement it in stages. So perhaps what I would do is get some of my best technicians, and I would identify a schedule for them. The afternoon of, I would stage the parts for them. And so this way, when they came in the morning, they could grab a cup of coffee, put their stuff on the truck, and they could be out within 15 minutes. So I'd test it with them, and then we'd move on to the rest of the organization. And if you do that, and you stick with the 30 days, chances are you're going to have a lot of success. So let's talk about change from an organizational perspective. And a lot of these ideas are basically the same, but it's how you want to look at it from the company's perspective. So you want to define the change and align it with your business goals. You want to identify the impact of the change on the business. Change starts at top. So if the president of the company and management doesn't buy in, chances are you're not going to get that change to stick. You want to develop your communication strategy, assess the cultural implications of change. So what does that mean? Well, what I like to do when we have change and there's a lot of things in flux is get a cross section of people, and maybe you decide you're going to do something on a Saturday, go to the racetrack, but you're going to have a meeting before. And what you do is you use that focus group to talk about the culture, how it's changed, and what you need to do to fix it. Then you want to make sure that you provide the training and resources that people need. You want to support the business during the change, and that includes being very hands-on with people. You want to expect the unexpected, you want to monitor your plan, and you want to remain agile. I have 3 change management models I want to share with you just to kind of reinforce this idea. The first one is Lewin's change management model, and it's real simple. All it says is unfreeze what the current situation is, go ahead and implement your changes for 30 days, and then refreeze the organization and draft standard operating procedures based on the new situation. Beckard and Harris pointed out two important things with respect to change. And they said in order for people to change, there has to be sufficient dissatisfaction as well as confidence that the new approach is going to be better. Hence, that's why I think the incentive plan really is a nice way to tie everything together. And then for those organizations that are bigger, you can see Kotter's 8 steps. It's broken down to 3 phases: creating a climate for change, engaging and enabling the organization, and implementing and sustaining the change. And I like to point out point number 2, because if you have a big organization, what you need to do is you need to get a bunch of teammates on your side. So obviously the managers will have to buy in. If there's influential people in your organization that people look up to and respect, get them involved in the process as well. Okay, so I want to move on to communications. I think communications is very important when you're implementing change. And perhaps the best example I can point to is World War II. The Nazis thought that if they bombed the English day and night for a couple months, that the people would just crack and Churchill would be forced to surrender to the Germans, and hence they wouldn't have to invade over the channel. Well, what happened was the reverse. After 56 days, people were more resolved. And a big part of that was the way Winston Churchill communicated a vision to the people of the future, the importance of fighting back. Perhaps an example here in the US is FDR's fireside chats. So during the Depression, it took the country a long time to get out of it. They didn't really know what was going on. Things they tried didn't work. But FDR was there every weekend talking to people, saying, here are the things that we're doing. Here are the things that we've changed to make things better. So last, before we move on to the next subject, I want to talk about 4 essentials for communicating during COVID. I'm sure you've heard this before. Over communicating is better than under communicating, and you want to communicate with empathy. So what does that mean? That means making sure your people are okay, but really all your stakeholders. So checking on the well-being of your customers, your suppliers, and other people that the organization interacts with. Number 2, you must communicate decisiveness in the face of uncertainty. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean making up some story and hoping that it works. What it means is being honest and saying, you know what, this is the first time we're all going through this, so we're going to figure it out. But here's our plan. We're going to do this first, and we think this is important for this reason, that reason, and the other reason. And if that doesn't work, we're going to move in this direction. So if you give people a vision, they feel very comfortable with the leader. Number 3, lead down, up, down, and across the organization. So again, those communications have to go to every person in the organization. And second, plan for what's next, not what just is. So in this crisis, again, because we're trying to figure it out, rely on your people. And if you see something that you need to tweak, give them more authority to take care of things. One statistic I left out about organizational change, about 80% of organizational change that is done well leads to financial benefit, but unfortunately 60 to 70% of change usually doesn't go that well. And you'll see that I'm going to point out statistics throughout these 7 principles. And what you'll see is a high consensus among people that it's important, but in practice, very few people are doing it. So the next section is talking about goal setting, employee appraisals, and counseling employees. The general rules for, let me just move this here. General rules for employee goal setting include involving the employee in the company planning process. So let them know what the company's goals and objectives are. Collaborating with the employee to establish his or her annual goals. And what I like to do is I give all my key employees a personal development plan. So what we do is we sit down and we say, well, what are the goals for the organization? What are the goals for your department? I often find that people aren't the best as far as software. They learn what they need to know. So what can we do to help you improve your software skills so you can better utilize the system? What personal development things do you need to further your career in the way of outside training and so forth? So that's step number 2. Step number 3, connect the employees' goals to the larger company goals. Make sure that the employees' goals are attainable and challenging. Break down each goal into time-specific, achievable tasks and milestones to ensure success. So remember, goals have to be 5 things: realistic, achievable, time-specific, they have to be challenging, and they have to be in writing. You want to monitor the employees' progress and coach them as needed, take a personal interest in their growth, and then have written job description that establishes what the employee's duties, functions, responsibilities are, authority, and measures of performance. So this is one thing I see not enough companies doing, putting together good job descriptions. You can go online and you can find out what the duties, which are task-oriented things, are for most positions, what the responsibilities are, which is something someone may or may not do, but ultimately they're accountable for. But you also have to include the American with Disability Act guidelines, what the physical requirements for the job are. I like to include authority, what you have the authority to do before you have to ask your manager. And most important are what I call measures of performance. And that's the way you can tie the goals and objectives to that employee's job description. So if they have sales quotas, or if they have to manage the profitability of their department, all that stuff are examples of measures of performance. Let's talk about managing virtual workers. So you want to make sure that the remote workspace is designed for productivity and the office workspace are redesigned for safety. Here's an interesting statistic. About 2/3 of organizations have their people working remotely. But interestingly, almost 60% don't have a procedure for that person working from home. And I know that when I've worked remotely in 2 circumstances, they really didn't manage my situation as much as I wanted to contribute. And so I wasn't nearly as productive as I could be. So what you need to do is you need to have a remote worker policy. As far as workspaces go, you have to redesign those for safety. I'm sure you guys have taken a lot of those steps already. Number 2, you want to establish morning and evening calls with your direct reports just to make sure they stay focused on their goals and objectives. Number 3, you want to provide plenty of feedback and express a genuine concern for your workers and other stakeholders. You want to work from established agendas and timeframes during your virtual meetings to remain productive. Make sure the entire team is communicating on a frequent basis. Widen the business's circle of decision makers and allow for more local decisions. Accelerate professional development around leadership, business development, customer service, and new digital skills that further the business's goals and objectives. Build and maintain team and employee morale. And I'm sorry, because of my bar, I can't see number 8, but you should be able to read that. So let's move on to feedback. What is feedback? Feedback's a response to employee performance or work product. There's 2 types of feedback. There's recognition or praise for excellent work, and then there's constructive feedback, which includes a prescriptive, information-based statement on a specific area that can be improved. And I thought this picture of the robots are cute because I've been involved in a relationship for a long time, and when I looked at the expression on the robot's face, I speculated that that robot is probably receiving constructive feedback and not positive feedback. So let's talk about the feedback process. Your feedback should be prompt, specific, and fixable. So do you have to wait until an employee evaluation to give feedback? No. As long as you can meet those 3 guidelines, sooner that you introduce the feedback, the better. Second, what you want to do is you want to prepare notes. And here's a great trick I saw a client of mine do. They were a big plumbing contractor up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had about 300 people. And unfortunately, when the field superintendent went to do evaluations, it really turned into a situation where people were asking for more money. And so what he did was he kept track of all the time they missed. And so, and they had a lot of big problems with absences. And so when the guy asked for more money, he would say, well, you know what, you missed 10 days, you get paid $15 an hour. If I extrapolate that out, in the last 6 months, you lost $1,200. For the year, it's going to be $2,400. So before we talk about a raise, let's make sure that you're here all the time so that you can make as much as we want you to make. You want to set a meeting in a quiet area. You want to hear the employee out during that meeting. Um, Number 5 talks about if there's a problem, it involves somebody, and let's say it involves the operation, it's okay to share constructive feedback to the group. So you don't necessarily have to point out that person who might have done things wrong. You can say, hey, here's something that we didn't have a plan for. We have a process now. Here's the process. Let's all do it so we can benefit in the future. Excuse me. And then last, you want to end the meeting on a positive note. I want to spend a little time talking about employee evaluations because I think that's something that most companies don't do well. Um, Going back to feedback, the statistic there was, I think, about 80% of people think feedback is important, but only 30% believe that they receive good feedback. So let's talk about best practices for giving employee evaluations. Evaluations are important during the new employee's probationary period, and so you should do an evaluation after the first 30 days. If that person hasn't lived up to your standards, you have to let them know that you need to make sure that by the time these 90 days are up, that you're doing all the things that are expected in order for you to be a full-time employee. If you don't do that, sometimes what ends up happening is you end up living with problems because you didn't manage the problem right up front. And I was sharing with Betsy a situation where I went in to talk to the client, and the client said, well, Jim, why don't you just look at your emails because I have to wait for the controller to get in to get you the financial reports. Well, the reason that the CFO came in late all the time was he didn't manage that issue up front. Evaluation should be performed quarterly after the probationary period, and you should really have a separate wage scale for giving people increases. So let's say you're a manufacturer, you should have a level 1 worker, a level 2 worker, a level 3 worker, and they should get increases based on them mastering those skills so that they're more valuable to the organization. So maybe they know more machines, they know how to fix the machine when it's broke, those kinds of things. The next point, evaluation should be performed by the employee's immediate supervisor. Very important. If you're the owner of the company and you're evaluating all your employees, what you're really doing is you're putting the person who manages that person at a disadvantage because the employee recognizes the person they have to please as you. So as long as you're happy with them, the manager really comes second. And I see lots of times managers struggle because of that problem. You want to make sure that somebody in the organization manages the process, administers the evaluation forms. You want the evaluation process to be a positive process. So the rule of 3, I think, is very important. The rule of 3 basically says, before you talk to somebody about something that you want them to change, introduce 3 positive things first. So, think about this example. Charlie, we have a problem with you coming in late, and it's really a big problem. Versus, Charlie, your work is fantastic. I love the quality of your work. You're a great team player. You always clean up your workstation before you leave, but we need to talk about you coming in late. It's received completely different. So whenever you have to give criticism, a lot of people don't like confrontation. Remember the rule of 3. And if you're focusing on getting people to change, focus on 1 or 2 things. Don't try to change 5 or 6 different things at one time. Management should help their key employees develop personal development plans. We talked about that, which should be broken down into quarterly goals. In terms of consistency, this is another big one. Let's say you're rating everybody on a scale of 1 to 10. Well, what does 5 mean? When I was going to college, everything was graded on a bell curve. And so that meant a couple people got A's, a lot of people got B's and C's, and there were people who got D's and F's. And that was a good system because what it did was it said, hey, you don't know everything. I remember when I was graduating from college, I went to a good college. I said, you kids are all smart, but you don't have any experience yet. And so they made us feel that there was a lot of room to improve. The culture today is not to hurt people's feelings, to build up their confidence. So everybody's an A or a B. Well, if you start off there with an apprentice, well, there isn't really that much room to improve. So you need to sit down with all your managers and have a standard grading process. Okay, and then you should also meet with your employees and talk about how to do the evaluation, how to handle problems that might pop up and so forth. Um, let's move on to coaching, counseling, and disciplining. And what I'd like to do is share with you these two quotes because I think they're both very important to this subject. So Brian Grazer is a film producer. He produced Apollo 13, 8 Mile, 24, A Beautiful Mind. And he says, I don't like to boss people around. I don't get motivated by telling people what to do. I don't take any pleasure in it. So I manage with curiosity by asking questions. And I think that's a great way to manage. Um, However, Peter Drucker, the father of management, said, unless there's commitment, there are only promises and hopes, there are no plans. So there also have to be standards. And Brian's approach may be great for high level actors, but you really need both of those elements. So let's talk about the difference between coaching, counseling, and disciplining. Coaching involves teaching something new and could include feedback. So the way Brian walks around and asks questions is clearly a circumstance of coaching. Counseling is a formal discussion between a supervisor and an employee about the employee's job performance in areas needing improvement. It's not discipline. We'll talk about discipline later. And when you counsel people, you should have a counseling meeting, a conversation with them that's followed by a memo um, that talks about the problem and documents what the solution is. Again, this is a big problem I see with businesses. They don't document things, they let things go. And then when their unemployment rates are real high, they say, well, I wish I would have done that. Discipline basically seeks to correct um, a problem. So when is discipline necessary? Um, when I do employee handbooks with clients, there's probably 24 different reasons. But some examples include physical, verbal assaults, sexual harassment, acts of discrimination, theft or destruction of property, insubordination, and other company policies. And when you're disciplining people, I just wanted to review, I know what most people know about the 4 steps of progressive discipline: verbal warning, written warning, suspension, demotion, and then termination. The Department of Labor says that if you follow those 4 steps, you have just cause for firing somebody. And if you do that, chances are you're not going to get dinged because that person had to be laid off. Now, just because of these 4 steps, I do want to mention that you don't necessarily have to go through those 4 steps. So if somebody comes to work drunk and they get in a physical altercation with somebody and that person goes to the hospital, you don't want to give them a verbal warning, right? You want to move right to termination. So if you have to counsel employees, let's talk about how to do that. The first thing you want to do is you want to gather the facts. And you want to ask the 4 questions highlighted in blue. And if one or more of those are yes, chances are you need to do a counseling session. So the first question is, was this incident possibly an illegal, unethical, dishonest, or highly inappropriate event? Number 2, did the employee know the incident was wrong? Has it happened before or could it happen again? And have you already provided coaching or training? So if you decide, yeah, we're going to have to do a counseling meeting, what you should do is there's a 3-step process. It's prepare, listen, and act. So get all your ducks in a row in terms of what happened, hear the employee out, and then take your action. You should constructively explain the problem to the employee. Don't make this meeting public. This is between you and the employee. Make sure that you have some ideas about how to correct the action and prevent it from happening in the future. Draft a counseling memo, and remember about kindness. So I made this real simple. Again, a lot of companies don't do a good job of documenting it. Here's the script that you can use for the meeting and the outline. Oops, excuse me. And the outline for documenting the incident. Okay, so as I mentioned when I set up the meeting, I wanted to talk to you about what happened on this date. This is what I understand happened. Is there anything else you think I should know? You let the employee explain that situation, then you restate it. Okay, so from your perspective, you're saying this is what happened. Great. To be clear, next time this happens, you should do this, and this is why you should do it. Then you want to ask, do you have any questions? Is there anything else I can do to make sure you're successful? and then you want to draft the counseling memo based on those conversations and make sure it's in the employee file, and they should sign off on it as well. So let's talk about delegation next. Delegation is also something that most people don't do well. And if you're an owner and you want to grow your business and you don't delegate, you're never going to get to where you want to go. An interesting statistic is, I think this is from Harvard Business Review, almost 80% of people leave because they're unhappy with the manager. And in the majority of the cases, it's because the manager didn't give that employee the opportunity to grow. So let's talk about delegation, what it is and why it's important. Delegation is the practice of assigning responsibility for accomplishing a project or task to someone else. Why is it important? Number one, it allows you and the organization to get more work done. Number two, it aids in the professional development of your staff. Number three, it builds trust and empowers employees. And it also helps you develop better managers. Is there an opportunity for you to delegate? This is an exercise I go through with all my clients. And what I do is I say, take a piece of paper and make 4 columns. And we're going to put all the things you do into one of those 4 buckets. The first one is going to be, here are the things that I absolutely have to hold on to. The second are going to be, here are the things that I could manage through a periodic report. So if you have a sales department that runs well, or an operation that runs well, maybe the operations manager or salesperson can just give you a weekly report, and that's your way of being kept in the loop and knowing what's going on. The third bucket is, here are the things I can manage by exception. So what do I mean by that? Office manager, you're in charge of the office supplies. You have a budget of $500 a month. If you go over that budget, or if you have to buy anything for more than $250, just check with me first. So that's just managing the exceptions. Okay, and number 4 is, why am I doing this? I worked at a big engineering company out in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour's drive from Pittsburgh. And the president of the company said, I'm overwhelmed with things to do. We went through this exercise, and he had 30-something different things. And the last thing that he put in bucket number 4 was making sure that there was plenty of toilet paper in the bathroom. And I said, well, certainly we can find somebody else to do that. So think about that exercise. You know, I talk to clients on the first day. I talk about Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule, which says 20% of what you do generates 80% of the value. So as an organization, you have to be focused on that 20%. As a president, you have to be focused on that 20%. Your department managers have to be focused on that 20%, your salespeople, and so forth. And so there's really an opportunity for everybody to look at what they're doing and look at ways for them to delegate more. So let's talk about how to delegate tasks effectively. Number 1, you want to choose the right person for the job. Number 2, you want to explain your reasoning. Number 3, you want to give clear instructions. Number 4, you want to provide the necessary training and resources. Number 5, you want to delegate the task and authority. Number 6, you want to check the person's work and give them honest feedback. Number 7, you want to recognize the employee when the task is completed. So one question I'm often asked is this: well, I have people that function at all different levels, so how do I delegate to those different people? So there's a theory called situational leadership, and it involves 4 different approaches. Let's say you want your assistant to do something that somebody forgot to do, and they have the motivation to do it, but they don't have the know-how. So what you basically want to do is you want to tell them how to do it, and oversee the task to make sure it's done correctly. The second step is when people have some competence, but they might not be motivated. You might not trust that they're going to do what they need to do. And in that case, what you need to do is you need to support that person. And so this is a little bit more than just directing them. You also want to engage in, this is why this is important to do this thing. Let's talk through this process and so forth. During the third step, they have a fair amount of competence, but again, you just want to make sure that it's being handled correctly. So in that case, what you really need to do is just kind of oversee the process. And the last step, where people have the confidence and the motivation to do it, then you can really hand it off, and it should get done for sure. Okay, let's move on to effective communications. The statistic there, it's a Harvard statistic again. About 80% of people think effective communications are important, but 75% of those people think that communication in their organization is average to fair. So a lot of this stuff is common sense. We're going to go through it. And what I would say is that if you have a communication issue in your organization, you can go back, look at these slides, and kind of see where you could possibly improve. So effective communications is the process of exchanging ideas, thoughts, knowledge, and information such that the purpose or intention is fulfilled in the best manner possible. If you look off to the right of the screen, there's 7 characteristics of effective communication: clear message, correct message, complete message, precise message, reliable, consideration of the recipient, and sender courtesy. And there are also skills as an individual that you need to communicate effectively. So they're listed off to the left. They include being understanding, observant, clear and brief, having emotional intelligence. Another word for that may be maturity, being self-confident, respectful, making sure that your nonverbal communications reinforce what you're saying. Again, about 70% of communications are nonverbal. So if you're saying one thing, but your body is saying something else, you're really setting a missed signal, and people will pick up on that and they'll act on that. Selecting the right medium. People overuse email, and lots of times, people get an email that they wrote late at night, or that someone wrote late at night, and it just rubs them the wrong way. Communicate in person whenever you can. Email is really more for providing information, or that's the way it should be used. Exercise good judgment and have good listening skills. What are the benefits of effective communications to a business? Well, they improve employee management, they improve team building, they help the organization grow, they build strong relationships, they help with transparency and developing trust, they facilitate creativity and innovation, reduce misunderstanding, and lead to organizational growth. So before we move on to our next topic, let's talk about 6 ways to improve communications in your business. If you don't have an open door policy, you should make sure you're communicating with your people. You should have weekly team meetings, and you should also have periodic one-on-one meetings. So let's say that you're a manager, you have 4 people in your department. The weekly meetings are really to talk big picture about projects and how they're going and so forth. But you don't necessarily want to get into the details on every specific job and customer. And so by picking one person each week and having a one-on-one meeting with them, then you really have a chance to drill down. It's more efficient. You're not explaining jobs that these other people aren't involved in, and it makes for a good formula for communications. You want to send out periodic employee surveys. Ask your employees how we're doing, how we can do better. You want to respect cultural differences. You want to give clear feedback or none at all. You want to seek employee buy-in. Okay, bring your employees in on the process. Encourage information sharing between your managers and departments. Use the right communication tools, and have occasional social events, like that summer picnic and the Christmas party at the end of the year. So we're doing pretty good in terms of time. This is the last subject, and it involves supervisory skills. I saw the statistic just this week. In 2019, businesses were polled, and they asked businesses about how well they supervise their employees. 77% said that there are gaps in their supervision. And when the economy was really doing well, it was hard to recruit people, and not everybody's cut out to be a supervisor. Generally, what happens, you might take somebody who has some very good technical skills and good time management, and they may have some good people skills, and you say, hey, I'm going to make that person a manager. So the 5 essential supervisory skills are leadership skills, time management skills, technical skills, communication skills, and judgment skills. And if you want to build a supervisory program, and I recommend that companies do that on their own, those are the 5 areas that you want to work on. And as Betsy mentioned earlier, the Small Business Development Center is offering free consulting. This is just one of the things you could do. Get help with job descriptions and all the other concepts in there. Ways to improve your stature as a supervisor. Inspire others by giving plenty of positive feedback. Share your plan and updates with coworkers. Listen, be courageous. Acknowledge failure. Lead by example. Show compassion. Recruit wisely. And I'm sorry, because of the bar, I can't see the last one. So, all right. Before we wrap things up, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about Agile Management. Agile Management is something that's really popped up in the last year or so, and it's been embraced by software companies. What they want to do is get their updates to market quickly, beat the competition. And so their ideas are really trickling down into management. So you may see more of this in the future. I just want to expose the idea to you and give you an idea of what it all means. So Agile Management favors individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So it's very much focused on the present and reacting to current circumstances. It involves working software over documented processes. So there's a lot of stuff happening with software now in terms of AI. Betsy mentioned that I'm doing a seminar on the 19th, Sales and Marketing Strategies in a Post-COVID World. And we talk a lot about what's going on in terms of customer relationship management and how you can use that to get more sales. Customer collaboration over contract negotiations. So you really want to be partners with customers. Responding to change as opposed to following a plan. Supporting, trusting, and motivating the team. Valuing simplicity. Focusing on details that can lead to meaningful change. And reflecting on how to be more efficient. Okay, so we really talked about a lot of different things. Just to summarize, the 7 essential leadership skills for leading in turbulent times. The first one involves effectively managing change. The second one is making sure you set goals. A lot of people, I'm sure, remember the study you learned in college. They talked about the Harvard study where they looked at people who set goals versus those who didn't. And the people who set goals achieved 10 times more than those that didn't. And that included people that went to Harvard who didn't set goals. Giving feedback, counseling employees to expectations, effective communication skills, delegating, and cultivating strong supervisory skills. Okay, Becky, do you want to
Hey,
join
Jim.
us?
Yeah, back on. Well, before we talk about the CARES applications, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I just had a couple of questions that had come in.
Mhm.
One of them talks about try to kind of helping, how do you incentivize your people to change, especially right now? It's hard to keep people motivated. And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. And putting together incentives is probably one of the more difficult things companies can do. And I think that if people are looking for incentive plans, for sure they want to sign up for your application. But to answer your question, just acknowledging people for doing hard work, that certainly goes a long way. But what I like to do is I like to look at the job process and say, hey, we have this much time allocated for the job, and if we get it done more quickly, I want to share some of those profits. The process to do that is pretty complex because what you want to do is you want to identify what the problem costs are, and if they change, how much the improvement would be, and you want to back into an incentive that would be motivating for somebody. So in terms of monetary incentives, there's a lot that goes into it, but you can go a long way just by showing people that you care and recognizing the work that they do.
Thank you. That kind of fits with the next question too, which, trying to help, how do I paint a picture of the future for my employees when I honestly don't know what the future holds?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the last thing you want to do is tell people something that isn't true. I remember when I was in college, the economy was really bad, and Ronald Reagan was running for president. And what Ronald Reagan said was, "Hey, I have a plan for making it better. I don't know if it's going to work, but there's this guy out in Chicago named Milton Friedman, and he said that if we reduce everybody's taxes, people are going to take that extra money and they're going to invest it in the economy. So the economy is going to grow." And there's this guy out at MIT named Laffer, and he said that if we offer incentives for people to invest in their equipment, they get new equipment, they're more efficient, they're going to make more profits. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to grow and there's going to be more jobs. And so he said it might take a while for all this to happen. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. And then the economy was on a great trajectory. So what's important is just to let people know that you have a plan and this is what you're going to do. You know, remember we talked about FDR. You might not get it right the first time, but if you let everybody know that you're in this together and you're doing everything to make sure you take care of your employees, that you're doing just about everything you can do. And people will accept that and acknowledge it.
Well, and that kind of, you mentioned a minute ago about your sales and marketing. And one of the questions was, can you share a little bit of some of your COVID sales and marketing ideas?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're going to talk about is virtual selling. The statistics say that 90% of businesses are involved in virtual selling. And so we're going to talk about how to sell virtually. The other thing that we're going to focus a lot on, like I mentioned in the webinar, is there's a lot happening in terms of customer relationship software. And there's different software options now where what you can do is you can get feedback about how many people responded to an email that you sent out. Chances are if they responded to it, they have some interest. And so what you can really do is you can compartmentalize the different ways that you sell to people based on this real-time information that you're getting together. So I think it's very important. People need to be pivoting towards the future. There are things that small businesses can do to start making those changes and taking advantage of things. So we're going to really lay out that process about how to reposition your sales and marketing for 2021.
Perfect. So that kind of leads us into, well, please add any more questions if you have anything in the chat. It's coming directly to me. I appreciate it. But then that leads us into just kind of our final slide here. Once again, reminding you all about all the services that we offer as an SBDC. You can learn more on our website, and then specifically about these CARE seminars. There's some wonderful information coming up. You'll be able to find information on all of it on the website. This seminar, as well as all of them, will be recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel in just a couple of days. And then please remember that CARES application. As Jim talked about, you have the ability, the potential to receive some customized consulting that we will set up for you and pay for you to receive this. So please take a moment and complete that CARES application. I've got some other resources that we're going to be able to send to you too if you apply for that I think will be very helpful. And we are so appreciative of all of you joining us, very appreciative of Jim taking the time to share this with us. And I don't see any more questions. If anybody there, quickly get them in if you do. But again, thank you. You know how to reach us. So send us an email if you have a question, and we hope to see you on our next webinar.
Thank you very much, Betsy.